All right, so we are going to do something a little differently today with this. Instead of me taking the notes with you guys and you copying them down at the same time, I pre-copied the notes into my composition notebook and I took a picture of them for you. That way I can kind of walk you through them and it's not as long of a video and you can still copy them down as you see them on the screen. So you're going to look at the picture that's in this video, and I will also attach this picture on here. But I'd really like you to listen to this video too, just so I can explain what these are all saying. So we're working with interrogative pronouns today. So we know what the word interrogative means because an interrogative sentence is one that asks a question. So we're working with pronouns that ask a question. There are 5 total interrogative pronouns. 3 of them are used which are taking up the majority of this page here. And they are all different forms of the same word. And then there are 2 that are completely different from them. So who, whom, and whose are the first 3 that we're looking at. Those are all forms of the pronoun who. So it's just the way that it's worded in a sentence, but they all kind of mean the same thing. So we have the word who, and now I'm on the second bullet here, right here. So who is used as a subject pronoun. So remember, subject pronouns are always the subject of the sentence, but it's a pronoun just replacing it. So instead of Mrs. Hurst as the subject, it's who, or her or she. But in this case, it's an interrogative pronoun. So we have the example here. Who is running for office? Running is your verb. Remember, we find subject plus verb. So subject is who. We could replace someone's name with that. Mrs. Hurst is running for office and turn that into a statement or even keep it a question. And we know that that's a subject pronoun because we can replace it with a person's name or something else, and it's the subject of the sentence. It's who's doing the verb. Okay? Also another example, who voted this morning? So those will always be used before your verb. If you use them after the verb, and I know I am guilty of this, which we'll get into in the next bullet here, you're technically saying it wrong. And it's kind of silly to say it the correct way because people will probably look at you going, you're really fancy. So this next bullet, when we start talking about the word whom with an M at the end, you actually are supposed to use whom as your object pronoun. So remember, your direct objects, which we kind of touched on a couple lessons ago, subject plus verb plus who or what. Okay, so subject plus verb plus who or what. If you can answer who or what did what, or who is receiving the action of that verb, and it's a interrogative pronoun, it will be the word whom. So whom do you believe? Now this, like I said, seems kind of fancy. Majority of the time you're not going to use this and you're not going to hear it very often in everyday language, but you do kind of have to reword the sentence in order to see if you're using the right one. So use whom as an object pronoun. Whom do you believe? Normally we would say, who do you believe? And I would say that same thing. To this day, I would not probably use the word whom. Whom do you believe? You actually have to reword it to double check to make sure you're making sense and you're using the right one. Because the word whom in that sentence is in the spot of a subject pronoun. But it's actually an object pronoun, so it has to be flip-flopped to the end of the sentence. So that's why we're rewording it. You do believe whom? You is your subject. Believe or do believe is your verb. Believe who? Believe whom. So technically, subject plus verb plus who or what, you are using whom as an object pronoun. That's why it's so tricky. And you're not going to probably in your everyday conversation take the time to reword your sentence quickly to see which one it is. But we're just touching base on this just so you can have that understanding. So the next example here, example number 2 under whom says, to whom is she waving to? So again, we have to reword that sentence. She, well, let's backtrack. Let's find the verb first, because sometimes that's easiest. Is waving is your verb, okay? Who is doing the waving? She. So she is your subject. Is waving is your verb. Waving who? Waving what? Some of those questions aren't actually being answered. That word to in there, to whom, kind of throws it off. But she is waving. You could probably get away with answering the question who. Waving who? Waving to whom. Okay? So now that is at the end. That is receiving the action of the verb. Whom is receiving the action of waving. So it's an object pronoun, should be used at the end, but it's used in the beginning. To check if whom is correct, make a statement out of the question just like we were practicing doing. Whom, not who, is correct because if it works as an object pronoun, the direct object, in each example, it's correct. I have that little arrow going off to the side that says reword, or sometimes you can double check with it and you can replace it with a person's name. So let's go back to those two examples with the reworded statement. You do believe Mrs. Hurst. Okay. Do believe who? Do believe Mrs. Hurst. If you can replace a name with it, technically it would be the object pronoun. Now you probably could replace a name with an object or a subject pronoun. Mrs. Hurst is running for office. But sometimes it helps to double check with replacing that name just to see if it's the subject or the object. It won't always work. Sometimes it will, so I thought I'd give you that piece of advice. But I would plan on rewording the statement, okay? Or rewording the question into a statement. Now, whose. This is one that we're more familiar with. Whose is the possessive form of who. Of course, you're probably thinking, oh, whose sock is this? Whose book is this? Whose pencil is this? It's showing possession, but we don't know who is doing the owning. So that's why it's a question word or an interrogative pronoun. You use it when you ask questions about ownership. Whose vote will win the election? Just be careful. I have a little note off to the side. Whose, W-H-O-S-E, is not equal to or not the same as W-H-O apostrophe S. Think about those contractions versus possessive pronouns that we looked at last time. Who is that second form of it. Even though they sound similar, we need to make sure we're using the right one. So don't use who is, use whose. Okay? Then the next one, which. This is most likely used with a person, an animal, or a thing. Which is faster? Which dog is yours? And a lot of the times it's being used to compare something to another or two nouns together. So a lot of the times it's asking a question, but it's kind of comparing at the same time. So it may not be paired with a noun, and you'll see that the next one could also be the same. That's that little arrow that I have on the notes here at the bottom of the page, showing that it may not necessarily be right before a noun like we looked at last lesson. It may be standing alone. Okay, so which is faster is standing alone, but the next sentence says which dog is yours. That one's paired before a noun. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And then the last one, the most common one that we'll use is what. That's used to describe a person, an animal, or a thing, or some type of object or a noun. So what book do you have? It could also be standing alone, saying what is that? Or what did you do? A lot of the times you'll probably, half and half, you'll use it with a noun or without a noun. But it's just saying, it's kind of asking a question about an object of some sort, whether it's a person, an animal, or a thing. So you have 5 interrogative pronouns, and actually those are the only 5 that exist in our language. I know in the past I've said, I'll give you a small list of pronouns, and I'll say it's just the most common ones, but it won't be all of them. Guess what? This one, there's only 5 interrogative pronouns. Who, whom, whose, which are all very similar to each other, same form, same root word of who, which, and what. Okay, so 5 of them. You are going to be doing the Google form that's attached to this here after you finish taking the notes. So if you need to pause this video right now, I'm done with the video and talking to you on here. But if you need to pause it to finish up the notes, please do so you can get that understanding in those notes down in your book, in your composition notebook. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.